Well, I want to thank everyone for joining the August 2022 VMware TAM customer webinar, where we're going to be digging into vRealize LogInsight Cloud today. So before I turn it over to our speaker, though, let me cover a couple of quick announcements. So first of all, please make sure that you use the Q&A feature of Zoom to ask any questions. And if for some reason your question doesn't get addressed today, be sure and reach out to your TAM and ask them to follow up on your behalf. We want to make sure we get all those addressed. As you see on the welcome slide, our September webinar is going to be some really significant features for our vSphere product solution, where we're going to be looking at some of the declarative configuration management functionality that's on its way to you here soon. So you're not going to want to miss this session. At the end of today's session, you will be prompted to fill out a simple 2-question survey related to the value you received from this session and any topic suggestions that you might have for future. So our goal in organizing this webinar each month is to create another avenue for you to receive value from being a TAM customer, and your completion of this survey helps us understand how we're doing on hitting that mark. So please take a minute if you would. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and you may have noticed that the QR code on the intro slide right there, if you were to click that, that's going to take you to the VMware TAM Services YouTube channel, where all of these recordings are ultimately made public. For the first few months, we do keep it unlisted, just for the exclusive use of our TAM customers. And so the link for the recording will come from your TAM. So that brings us to today's speaker. And so Serge is the Director of Product Management for vRealize LogInsight and LogInsight Cloud. And I'd just like to point out that when a product manager joins an event like this, not only is it a great opportunity for you to hear information about the current solution, but do know that your active participation with questions and comments can help shape the future of these solutions. So please be active in today's webinar using the Q&A feature. And with that, I'll turn it over to Serge.
Thank you very much, Andy, and good morning and probably good afternoon for a lot of you there. So I'm really pleased today to be able to be a guest here and to speak a little bit about LogInsight and LogInsight Cloud, especially. I'm new to this role, so I've been with VMware for more than 4 years, but I joined Kamesh's team in the Cloud Ops back in April. So I guess that's still less than 6 months that I've been in this role. I'm really happy and excited. I came from what was called the Service and Edge BU, or the Telco BU as it was called, prior to that. I have quite a bit of experience in terms of network management, monitoring and so forth, and I was really pleased to join Kamesh's team to run the LogInsight product suite. What I want to stress really here is the fact that VMware vRealize family is really focusing on 2 aspects: the structured data, so you have products like VROPS that you're familiar, vRNI, and so forth, that are really designed to take the events and metrics that different infrastructure application systems are making available through APIs or other means, and giving the ability to monitor. On the other hand, what's below the surface here, using the cliche of the iceberg, is there's a lot more unstructured data that exists out there. And that unstructured data represents, first of all, some real-time information, but also represents a richness of data that is not otherwise visible or made available through existing events and metrics that are collected and monitored. So where the value comes, and we believe is really critical and important for all of you as our customers, is bringing those 2 together. And today we build quite a bit of integration between our products, between vROPS in particular and vRLIC, both on-prem and cloud editions, and how these are bringing additional value, first from a real-time standpoint, because vRealize the ability to monitor in real time all the logs, being able to detect patterns in real time, perform analytics, machine learning in real time, especially the cloud edition that is able to scale much more than the on-prem edition. And then on one channel feeding those events, so it's actually creating its own events. It is really processing this unstructured data into structured information in the form of events and metrics that are then passed to vRops. And vRops has now the ability to take those and provide additional monitoring, viewing, machine learning to then take actions. And then there's, of course, direct channel from vRLI into automation systems such as VRO, or maybe I would imagine you might be using products like ServiceNow and others out there, various form of automation system, to feed the actions, or at least the notifications, into those systems to take the necessary action to remediate the problem. So that's, first of all, the high-level vision in terms of how here with the vRealize suite, we're able to provide a full slate of information and the ability to truly monitor your environments. And that's obviously the VMware infrastructure, but also applications that you're running, and whether we're talking about containers, Kubernetes, or, just VMs, all of that, comes really together in one suite of products. So let me pause here for a second, see if there's any, question before I proceed.
Serge, are you reading the screen, or do you want me to read that to you?
Yeah, if you don't mind reading it.
Sure. Robert Wilson just makes a comment, kind of addressing your initial comments, that there's certain products out there, Splunk, Datadog, et cetera, are considered a standard in logging. Most companies have a tool of this nature already and only tend to onboard vRLI to manage VMware Kit, then fire those logs to already centralized tools. And so talking about getting vRLI in the door as the main tool really needs a greenfield implementation, or something that will outdo what those other products do to take any share of that market.
Okay, so great question. So let me talk a little bit in terms of security and SIEM in particular. This has not been our focus at the moment. VMware's other solutions. We are looking from a roadmap standpoint into next year in extending really the log analytics into SIEM and actually going beyond that with things like SOAR. But and what I'll share in a minute is we've actually come up with a lot of functionality in the product that we believe outside of SIEM is in par with the competition, the Splunk, the LogSIO out there, and such. There's, as you know, many products, and that's why we want to make sure that there's visibility into that, because we've done a lot of catching up in the last couple of years. As I mentioned, I'm new to this team, to this role, and I'm really driving forward the product, as we believe that log is really something very critical. So let me talk a little bit about what are some of those key benefits that we believe LogInsight, both on-prem and cloud edition, provide. For the cloud, I would say in particular, quite a bit around compliance, and I'd love to hear your feedback as well. But what I see is a lot of our initial customers that are moving to the cloud are moving for compliance reason, for archiving all the data, saving some storage space, perhaps in pushing that. And our costs are very competitive in that regard. So we see a lot of that out there. And what makes it possible, I believe, is the fact that we have over 200 source of integration, content packs, as we call them, and different log sources for both VMware products and non-VMware products. So we have something that we believe is very rich in terms of being able to collect a deep and wide set of information, logs specifically, out there. We've also made some tremendous progress in terms of the dashboard, the widgets, and so forth. Not sure if you're aware, but you can not only create your own content pack if there's some logs out there that are not done out of the box with LogInsight. So it's easy to create to interface, to create, generate more, feeds and ingest into LogInsight, but it's also very easy to create your own dashboard, customize them to the way you need and such. So this is something that actually we've seen a lot of customers using and partners as well to take advantage of. Then monitoring for availability, I think is critical, in particular because, as I mentioned, we process the logs in real time. So we have the ability to detect and alert just a simple case of maybe a log is not being generated, or there's no more writes that are going to a log. So we're able to identify those in real time and alert you very quickly that there may be some issues in terms of availability of some of your systems. Cost also is significant. We have a very good pricing, and then being able to manage the risk really in terms of looking at firewall logs in particular. We're working with some customers who are looking at, even though, as I said, we're not a SIEM-based product, but there's a lot of pattern recognition that can be done to identify if perhaps there were some attacks in your environment. Excuse me. What I want to spend a couple of minutes is explaining really, sorry, my voice is a little dry this morning, explaining a little bit in terms of how we see the hybrid world of log analytics taking shape. And I imagine the majority of you here that are using LogInsight are using it on-prem for monitoring your on-prem data centers. But I would also imagine a lot of you are in various phases in the journey of moving to the cloud. So when we introduced vRealize LogInsight Cloud, initially there were really two distinct products. But what we quickly did is we combined the two. First, via a cloud, proxy. So now what we have is we have a federated system, a hybrid environment that allows you to manage from the cloud your on-prem systems, as well as your clouds, whether they might be on VMware cloud or they might be cloud native. And regardless of the type of applications that you have, if you have more legacy applications or if you have more modern cloud native applications out there that you develop, and everything really funnels into vRLIC to provide you with a well integrated solution that looks at both on-prem and cloud-based systems and applications that you have deployed out there. Some of the things that we're adding, in fact, are federated queries, being able to establish a query in the cloud and the query automatically being smart enough to sort of distribute based on where the data is actually being pulled. Whether it is something that has to go onto on-prem to collect the data and report back, or in the cloud, or in more and more cases to unify those two together. So this is what we introduced as a means to really provide our customers with a single point of ability to manage your logs, and whether you have systems that are on-prem or not. I see there's a couple of questions on the chat. Let me see if I can bring them up quickly here.
Yeah, Serge, I've got a couple of them are feedback kind of things, which I'm going to get to you. So I would ask people to keep sending these, and I'm just going to give you a brief answer back. I'll type it out, but ultimately I'll get the Q&A to you, Serge, after the fact.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
But there's a question I do here that would like to know if we can monitor the historical disk usage of VMs and data stores with this. It's a pretty specific question, but do you happen to know off the top of your head? Disk usage of VMs and data stores.
Right. So yes, you can. It's not out of the box, but you can do that. We have, just as additional information, we have a vSAN content pack, as well, that allows you to monitor your vSAN environment in terms of, what the consumption is and so forth. But if you want specifically for the storage that is attached to your VMs, if it is not through vSAN, this is something that you would need to have a custom org to do that.
Okay, no other questions, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and what I want to show everyone here is some of the latest, what's new in a product, in other words. So what I've talked really about so far is really with regards to what we have, kind of a high level vision, if you will. And what I want to go over a little bit here is to share with you what we're doing from a roadmap, and especially what we have recently introduced in the product. So I'm just going to switch deck for a quick minute here. So bear with me for one quick minute.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, I had it at my fingertip earlier. Okay, somehow it had disappeared.
In the meantime, I'll say some of those comments that were made are helpful in terms of the specific examples of where you struggle or what you're looking for. And so thanks for those, and we will gather those and send them to the product team after.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go. Now I'll share the screen.
Yeah,
okay.
We see it now. Yep.
Okay, awesome. So first, let me talk a little bit about our release cadence. We're releasing every month new, and by releasing, we're putting in production from the cloud edition. So for vRealize, every month we release some new features, bug fixes, of course, security vulnerabilities that we're addressing. And obviously, security vulnerabilities are on everybody's top mind. So this is really the first thing that we do as we do scans directly during the build. So we see on a daily basis if there's some new vulnerabilities that perhaps would come out, or new things that we learn from the industry. And we obviously work closely with our corporate security team. So we have monthly releases on the cloud side. For the on-prem edition, we're doing every 6 months. We did introduce version 8.8 back in May, I think it was. And we're working on the next version that is slated for early October, to come out. Now, we've done quite a bit, as I mentioned at the beginning, in terms of providing new richness over the last couple of years. And since the deck will be made available to you folks, I'm not going to bore you too much, at least with some of the things that we've done. I've already talked about the 200 plus sources. But what you may not be aware is we've introduced some rule engines, some alert management that I believe has been very valuable for customers. Machine learning, obviously, is something that's really important. And there's a couple of key things here that I'll talk about with regard to the machine learning that we introduce is looking for patterns, looking for anomalies, comparing logs. So being able to compare sort of before and after image, if you will. So for you folks in particular that are migrating your workloads to the cloud, one of the first thing is planning, obviously. So you have the ability to see what kind of patterns, log pattern is happening with your workloads, with your applications, your environments, and so forth, and being able to save that, if you will, and plan in terms of what going to be the consumption, the usage, having an idea of what the performance has been and other factors. Then as you're doing your migration, as you're going from the various phases before you reach production, one of the key advantage that we introduce is the ability to now compare your logs, compare what they look like when you were running in production on-prem, what it looks like now as you're progressively staging to go in the cloud and go in production, to be able to see that the behavior maybe is different, to see that all systems are go, that you're collecting logs from all the systems that you were collecting before, and you're not missing some unless you choose to, of course. You're able to see maybe any performance changes, any type of pattern changes that is happening. So all of those things have been implemented in the product. And I talked also in terms of some of the great work that we did in terms of not only introducing new rich dashboards, but giving you the ability to create and easily customize your own dashboards. I'm flipping through slides very quickly here and just catching on the important ones. Log management in Kubernetes world. I imagine the majority of you folks are involved to some degree with Kubernetes, with containers, and you probably have a DevOps environment for your own IT, for a lot of the work and internal applications that you might be developing within your company. So we've done a lot of work in that regards as well, in terms of offering log management for your Kubernetes environment, being able to see when certain containers. So similar to what we've done with VMs, I would summarize it to that we've done and introduced with regards to Kubernetes, containers, in particular, being able to monitor those to see if any of them, go down or have been deleted or anything of that nature that may be abnormal that's taking place. Exploring.
Hey, Serge,
yes.
a question here that's just kind of related to what you're talking about. So if I could ask it
Sure.
now.
Please.
Yeah, how much and what type of data travels towards the cloud version? So we've got on-prem, and it seems we would have to upgrade our MPLS circuits if the same data were needed to be sent off-site. So at some point, if you could talk about the type and amount of traffic that goes to cloud.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So let me address it now. So first of all, you have the choice, right? You can control how much of the data that you want to pass through and send to the cloud. So we give you those options, and some of the new things actually that we're going to be introducing in later this year is giving you visibility in terms of which logs today that have been the most used, the most beneficial to you, and giving you suggestions so that we don't do a brute force method of, okay, you're collecting 100 logs today on-prem, you're going to collect all 100 of them if maybe if you only need about half of that. So we're working to be smarter at that, not just to give you the options, but also to give you the visibility in terms of what has been useful from a log analytics standpoint on-prem, and suggest you which logs should be moving into the cloud as a way to to reduce that aspect, not only the traffic, but also the storage that takes place. So that's one aspect. The second, which exists, is obviously the retention aspect. So even if you are pushing all the logs through onto the cloud, there's a retention that you have the ability to control, of course, and that's the same as what's on-prem. So if you want 7 days or 14 days, for example, you can do that. And as far as archiving for compliance reason, that's moved to secondary storage, to save costs. So there's really a distinction between the cost of storage that may be necessary for troubleshooting versus the cost of storage for archival compliance, type of use cases that is a lot cheaper. So we give you those as well. But to give you an idea, if as I talked about earlier in terms of planning phase, if you assume that you're going to take all the logs that you're collecting and persisting today on-prem, and that, say, theoretically, you're moving all of those to the cloud, the amount of data is going to be the same, right? So if you're ingesting, say, a terabyte a day of logs on-prem, you will be continuing to ingest that and push that terabyte, to the cloud if we're not changing anything. But like I said, we're giving you the controls so you can do the right thing for you. So I hope that addresses the question that was in the chat.
Thank you.
Yep. So live tell.
I interrupted you before that last slide, by the way. So I don't know if you had something to say there. You didn't speak to the last.
Yeah, you're right. So thank you.
Okay.
So log exploration. So what we did here in terms of the natural language that we've introduced. So I think people are probably familiar with the tagging, and as mentioned, the different pattern that we identify, with the product, the filtering, all of that richness that exists. And what we've done really is making the querying easier, more from a natural language, if you will. So unlike some other products where you have to have a specific syntax, almost as if you're writing scripts or going a programming language, you can do that. But what we've implemented is something more natural for humans to go in the UI and type what you're looking for as you're exploring your logs, as you're searching for that needle in a haystack. And I'll get to the needle of the haystack in a couple of slides from here as well. So I mentioned in terms of the real time. So the live tail is something that was introduced, I think, back in Q2, if I'm not mistaken, so fairly recent event type. So, speaking of reducing the number of logs, you can be specific. This is for, the cloud edition, but like I say, you can apply that as you're able to control the amount of data, the amount of volume of logs that you're pushing. So by event type, you have various mechanisms to control that. Event trends. So this is something new also that has been introduced in Q2 to give you the ability to see what sort of trend are taking place. I mentioned the log comparison that we can do if you're moving your workload, for example, but whether it is something that you're not moving workload or you already did move, and maybe you have greater consumption, maybe greater usage of your environments, and you want to see what kind of trend going on in terms of event. Maybe there's some systematic issues going on below the radar that you're not able to reflect. And again, if you picture that first slide that I had about the iceberg, right? A key aspect is we want to show you really what's going on under the hood. And this is one of the key aspects that not only gives you that insight, but gives you the trend of those events that are taking place if we see some growth or some issues going on. And what you'll see in our roadmap is we're moving much more, we're shifting, we're actually transforming the product from being troubleshooting reactive tool to, like here, looking at trend of what happened, but having the human being make the decision saying, oh, I see this is happening, I see this trend. So I need to think about the following. And as we're injecting much more machine learning, what you're going to see happening over the course of the next few quarters is much more proactive type of use cases that we're going to be introducing. So rather than saying, hey, we see a trend, want to let you know, but you need to figure out what to do, what you're going to see us doing is we're seeing a trend, here's what's going on. and here's what we suggest that you do, and then it'll be up to you to decide how much you want to automate the action. We realize that it will take some getting used to, but ultimately we're moving toward full automation for a lot of those anomalies that would otherwise not be visible. Knowledge base. This is a key one, and I'd love to hear your feedback. So this was introduced just a few months ago, very recently. What we do here is we look at the VMware knowledge base. So I think on a weekly basis, we crawl through the VMware knowledge base of all of our products. And when we monitor your logs, we look for patterns, for issues that have been indicated, documented in those KB articles. And we alarm you if we do see something. So if you have, for example, an old version of vCenter, if there's a known issue with that has been documented, and we see in those logs that you have that old version, we alert you on that. Or if we see a problem that seems to be related to an issue, it's not just based on the version, but it's based on a number of different things. In other words, if we recognize and we see a pattern, then we alert you on that, and you now have the ability, to take action. And I'd love to hear your feedback, because what we want to do is we want to do the same thing for non-VMware infrastructure. So, AWS, for example, we want to be able to understand what are the documented issues, and being able to scan those, and then as we go through all your logs, to be able to do the same thing and being able to flush out those issues if you have something that is a known issue on AWS or on AKS or whichever the case might be. So if this is something that you think would be important to you, I'd love to hear from you folks if you think that this is something we should focus on, or if you have other suggestions, of course, would like to hear. I'll talk quickly about this one here, alert customizations, notifications. So a lot has been done here, and we're integrating, this was one gap that we had when we introduced the vRLIC cloud as opposed to vRLIC on-prem. The alerts from the logs from LogInsight cloud were not flowing to vRops. This is something that we're not implemented. So this is something that we are implementing, and it'll be coming, excuse me, next in our roadmap. But what we have today introduced is a much richer ability to and flexibility to let you customize the alerts and be notified on issues. So especially as we develop more pattern recognition, more ML, and we'll continue aggressively on developing more ML aspect, the alarms, the notification becomes really important, again, as we want you to be able to tie that into some remediation mechanism as well, whether it is manual or automated or anywhere in between. Something else we're also looking at is, as we know, probably all of you are using vRops and using its alarm views. We're looking at integrating those two, as opposed to giving you two products, two alert screens, two different ways of doing alerts. It's kind of silly. But so what we're doing is looking at how do we integrate and unify that, so there's one way of doing alerts, whether you're doing it for metrics or you're doing it for logs. Andy, I see a couple of questions.
Yeah, let me recap those for you. The one deals with your ask about KB Insights 2 slides ago, and just noting that it sounds similar to what Skyline is already doing. And so could you touch on that? Skyline, where they're looking at security issues, they're looking at KBs and things like that, and raising those that way. So I think part of the distinction you were making was non-VMware products, but maybe you could just address that Skyline question, and then I've got one more for you.
Okay, so first of all, I think Skyline is not necessarily looking at the logs. We're looking specifically at the logs, and we're not limiting whether it is, security related or not. We're looking at all the KB articles that VMware produces, and comparing that with all the logs that are being processed through LogInsight. So there's no limitations, if you will, and that I would say is the key difference.
Okay. Okay, good. And so Felix, thank you for the integration. I think the things you were just talking about, the alerting and things like that, and the direction of going forward of consolidating that. And then a question about whether the KB functionality would be included in the on-prem vRLI installations, or is that a cloud-only feature?
At the moment, it's a cloud-only feature. And what I think is important to mention is we have a cloud-first strategy, right? So it doesn't mean that something will only be on a cloud. And yes, there's some exceptions. Some features will go on-prem before they go in the cloud, mostly to address specific customer needs. But so our policy is really customer for cloud and customer first, of course, but cloud first. And then as we see the need out there to push some of those features on-prem as well. So we're going to look at that. Now, we believe that probably for 99%, maybe even 100% of our customers over the course of the next few years, we're going to be in this hybrid mode of on-prem and in a cloud, and maybe even beyond the next few years. I don't have a good crystal ball, so I can't say what things will look like 10 years from today. But what I can say is in the foreseeable future, we don't believe that everything is going to be migrated to the cloud. There may be some customers that do that, but I think the great majority of the customers are going to have this hybrid mode. So we're going to have to find the right balance in terms of, okay, we're going to add this new cool feature in the cloud first. We're going to see how it's adopted and so forth by our customers, and we're going to see, of course, the necessity of making it also on-prem as well, so that our customers can balance certain workloads, certain applications that maybe some of the governments or other reasons to continue to have certain applications and infrastructure on-prem that will necessitate the same features. So we're looking at those very closely.
Okay, good. Let's see, just continuing on this, it would be great if when you get an alert, there is an easy way for us to add commands for resolution. So I don't know if that's like the actions. Maybe Felix, if you could flesh that out a little bit, if that's like actions in VROPS or Serge, maybe you did understand. Okay, actions. Yeah.
No, I think I got it. If my answer is not addressing the question, please please rephrase it for me. So as we want to move toward greater automation, and especially when it comes to remediation, there is a gap today in the industry. So it's not just VMware, but all across the board, because you have a lot of great tools that are able to tell you what the problem is, right? There's been a lot of effort in the industry, and VMware has been leading in that space with machine learning in particular to say, here's the needle in a haystack. Okay. Here's the impact that this has, right? Because of this, your application is running 30% slower, or whatever. And yes, there's great remediation tools out there, but what do you do, right? What do you take this problem once you understand what is the issue and automatically remediate it? And that's a very complex domain. So what we're doing first is looking at running specific scripts, not only things that we believe need to be generated to a VM because it's it's running out of CPU or something of that nature. So there's some simple scripts like that that can be taken care of to take the necessary action. And each customer probably wants to customize. So what we're doing is we're looking at, okay, we understand the root cause, we know what the problem is, And of course, we're looking not only reactively, but most importantly, proactively, as I was showing a minute ago in terms of trends, right? So we believe you're going to run out of resources, whatever, over here. So I'm not talking just from a log, but more generally. Then the system will suggest to run a script. And picture, if you will, what I think Microsoft Windows, they may still do it, but if you're copying a bunch of files, or if you are repeating the same operation, it says, check this checkbox over here if you want me to do this every time, that I see this. So we're going to do something very similar here in terms of we're enabling to detect and find a root cause reactively, then proactively looking at trends in specific patterns, and then later to say, we suggest running this script, or you can create your own script or customize an existing one. You decide to run it manually, maybe for the first 3 months or whatever, until you feel comfortable, and then check this off, and it will automatically run it for you every time that it sees that. So this is a key aspect of really putting everything together. If you remember again, the iceberg slide that I showed at the beginning, showing the closed loop automation from detecting a problem, whether it's structured or unstructured data, being able to alert and notify into some automation, service, and this automation service, resolving the problem and then repeating the process. So this is really crucial.
There's a question about regards to Kubernetes. Is there a management pack for VRA 8.x or a content pack?
I believe there is one. I will need to double check among the list of 200.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there is one. Actually, what we're doing is a content pack for vRAC is some of the things that's in the workings right now.
Got it. Got it. And then another question, talking about, there was a period where the integration of the on-prem products, vRLI and vRops, was quite tight, and you kind of had seamless movement between them, passing identifiers, et cetera. And could we expect the same tight integration to be in?
Yeah, not only the same type of tight integration, but advancing that much farther. As I was, in fact, this is the right slide here in terms of what we've achieved today. But, frankly, when, and that's often the case when you introduce a new product. So when we launch vRLIC, we could not, in the first, couple of releases, we could not really have full parity with what we have with the on-prem edition. We're closing that. So one of the key gaps that we're closing in a couple of months, expected in the September or early October timeframe, is the ability to have all of the logs, all of the alerts coming from log going to vRops. That is currently a gap. So we're closing that. There's a couple of smaller gaps as well that we're closing. So I personally want to make sure that we close all the gaps. Otherwise, I find it difficult to convince our customers, convince you guys to say, well, please move to the cloud, but please wait, we're going to introduce the feature you love. And that doesn't work, right? So I want to make sure that we take care of those. And we advance the product to a point where what you will see is really leveraging a lot of the capabilities that exist in vRops. So I talk quite a bit in terms of ML, trending, patterns, and all of this. vRops, and I'm sure you're well aware because you're using it today, as some tremendous ML capabilities. It would behoove us to recreate those with our vRLIC engineering team when they exist in vRops. That's silly. So what you're going to see is greater integration between our products and unification of features, being able to generate those events and metrics that I talked about at the beginning, which we do today, passing those events and metrics to vRops and letting vRops do the, all the cool ML and doing baselining and such, being able to see that some metrics that we generate from the logs, you're able to not only visualize them in vRops, but you're able to see notifications that come out of it if maybe there's an increased percentage in VMs that are going, some specific VMs that are going down, or some other odd patterns that's taking place, that we're able to leverage that. So that's one key area that we really are aggressively investing between our two products. vRNI as well, right? Network insights. There's a lot of network logs out there that we collect, or customers also have customized to collect, that would be very beneficial to what vRNI does, today with regards to flows that it monitors and applications that it discovers. So that's another aspect. The third aspect, and in my opinion, one of the most important ones, is being able to give you business context, right? That you deployed some applications on top of infrastructure. vRops is able to discover those applications, to know where those applications sit. They sit on the following VMs, or on the following containers, and those containers on the following VMs, and so forth. And with log management, having the ability, when we see some problems in, say, one of the logs from a given VM, perhaps maybe went down or whatever, being able to put the business context, being able to tell you this is the VM that is for this application, and therefore there's an impact on that application. So between the log analytics, the metrics that vRops collects, obviously, to really enrich that and put it in business context of your applications being impacted. And the last mile is to go above applications and into services. And by services, I really mean a group of applications. So most of you, I'm sure, have a web presence. So you're monitoring something like, Tomcat, and you might have a database behind where, say, you have customer transactions that are stored maybe, and a set of VMs and containers that have the actual application, right, for your web content. All of that form a service. And how do we provide proper and full monitoring for such service, not just at the application that tells you there's a problem with this database over here, or there's a problem with Tomcat, but really being able to tell you that a particular service that is business critical, especially, is experiencing some issues, right? So those are the type of advancements that we're bringing in unifying and making our products, stronger, and much more, compelling, as opposed to having vRops on one side, vRLIC on the other side, vRNI and so forth, but really unifying into combined use cases and solutions. That's a big thing that you're going to see. And if some of you are going to be attending Explore, which I hope you are, you'll see several announcements and projects that are going on in that space. So I kind of described this slide in the future of this slide in what I answered here. What's new? I talked quite a bit about that already, so I'm going to skip. I'm going to jump to, actually, let me talk a little bit about the on-prem edition 8.8 version. Andy, how much more time do I have?
Up to like 35 more minutes if you want it.
Okay. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
We're getting a lot of great feedback here. I know it's slowing you down a little bit. So yeah, we've got another half hour.
That's exactly what it's for. So it's no problem.
Good.
So, so what have we done on the on-prem side? So even though, like I say, our focus is on the cloud first, but we've done a lot on the on-prem. So we've introduced webhook, templates for VRO. So as I was talking about, and one of the gentlemen, I think, a question about the action. So you can take action integrating with VRO via webhook to be able to actually do something about it, right? So that we believe is important. So we introduced that. We did some UX work. In fact, you're going to see a greater unification of the UI between on-prem and the cloud, as well as with vRops, but taking it one step at a time within our product. We want to make sure that it doesn't look like we have two log management product, one for on-prem and one for cloud, but rather that we have one. So we're unifying the UI is one of the key aspects that we're doing, meaning that as we're putting new features, as we're designing a better user interface in the cloud, we're reflecting this, for on-prem as well. So like I said, it doesn't look like two different products. Log forwarding to the cloud, obviously, has been important. We talked a little bit about that. The alert history, query performance. So in terms of improving the stability and scalability, so the product has really been pushed more and more over the years, which is a great problem to have. And so our engineering team has really been working very hard to make sure the product remains stable as it's being pushed further and further. We do anticipate that more is going to shift to the cloud, but we're in this transition mode where obviously a lot of our customers are continuing to put more demand on the on-prem edition, and we need to respond to that and stay on top of it. Federated log management, also a key aspect that we introduced. And I talked about federated queries, which will be the next thing that we're going to be introducing probably in later this year. So roadmap. What's available? I talked quite a bit about the future already, and I also talked quite a bit in terms of what is available, today. So I'm not going to go through all of those because I already, covered, I think, the important ones. One that I did not cover is in terms of geo support, especially important for the cloud. If any of you here are Canadian customers, we introduce Canada as one of our region where the log can be stored. So we know, especially Canadian government, but even if you're a private company, you may prefer to have your log information being stored within the Canadian borders. So we are enabled that. We had previously introduced for European Union, and we have Australia. And we're looking at next at Japan and UK. UK, of course, that is not longer part of European Union, that becomes a priority. So we're looking at those two countries next. So that may be a value here for some of you, perhaps. Next, so a lot more in terms of the alert integration that I discussed as well. I also talked about the log filtering, how today we let you configure, but we're going to be introducing some smarter ways so that you don't have a bad surprise when you see an expensive bill for all the logs, or as the gentleman I think mentioned, in terms of your MPLS network between on-prem and the cloud. We don't want to bog down your network. So being smarter at what is ingested, filtering capability, and what really is necessary to push into the cloud versus what may not be that important, perhaps. And again, balancing between on-prem and the cloud, especially with our federated queries. You'll be able to take smarter decision in terms of saying, it's something that will remain on-prem, yet I want to take advantage of some of the advanced features that are in the cloud. So the federated queries will be able to provide you some similar functionality, yet the data will be able to stay on-prem for those applications that you're not migrating. Let's see what else that I didn't talk. Experience, so toward the middle bullet here, experience region selection during onboarding. So what we found when we introduce Canada as a region, actually we found out before with I think Germany, when we introduced that, is there's still too many steps. The default location is the US. It's still a little bit convoluted in terms of how we do this. So we're going to be focusing on making this easier. So for any foreign customers, non-US customers here on the phone, as I mentioned, we're considering to introduce UK and Japan, but even if you're in Canada, we'll have a better mechanism that says, okay, where do you want to push those logs? Which region do you want to be able to push that? So you'll be able to do that without having the default, being always the US. So we're gonna, fix that. DevOps, also a key area that we're looking into. We, by the way, have a session that explore where we're going to go into this. So if any of you are going to be there, you might be interested in that, where we're looking at all the key aspects and needs from a DevOps perspective. And it's not only going to be looking at the log management, but a bigger picture. Future. So more as the DC region that I talked about. And if anybody here on the phone, has some priorities in some other countries, please let us know, because we obviously react to customer feedback, to a lot of the things that we're doing. The next is in terms of notification before ingesting quotas exceeded. So, today we don't do a very good job at notifying you when your quota is exceeded. So this is one key aspect that we want to address, to give you sort of a early warning if that ingestion rate is going higher than what you had planned. So we don't want to surprise you. What else I think is important? Emailing, report scheduling. So actually that is going to come in October. So fairly soon. We push that more aggressively. Vulnerability insight. So this also, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're not really designed as a SIEM product, but there are certainly some small things that make sense to do in terms of giving you some insight in the vulnerability of your product. So again, leveraging ML specifically, but being able to look at maybe abnormal deletions of VMs or abnormal activity from a particular administrator. Maybe they stole that person's password, and some hacker is trying to do some damage. So looking at those vulnerabilities more seriously. And then actually I didn't talk about it from a DevOps standpoint. One of the key areas also that we're looking at from a vulnerability standpoint is, as your developers are coding, right, not after they built and implemented the solution, but as they are coding, to automatically scan and look for vulnerabilities as they are typing editing the application that they're writing. So a lot more real-time ability to look at issues that are going on. And as I mentioned, as we're transforming the product to be much more proactive than what it is today, looking forward to avoiding completely, well, not completely, I wish, but to minimize from a proactive standpoint any vulnerabilities that you may be facing with from a DevOps standpoint, from applications that your own developers might be generating, and to be able to do that as they are creating those applications, or at minimum at build time. So way before this goes into production, this goes into any form of tests, to flush those out, first. Any questions before I move on? I mean, this is one of my last slides here in terms of reflecting the different things that we're working on.
There aren't any open questions.
Okay. Let me talk about this one. So there will be some announcements that are going to be done. So we have a product, maybe some of you are familiar, Tanzu Observability, or Wavefront, as it used to be called, a few years ago. Wavefront is really used for monitoring metrics and traces in also near real time or real time actually. And we've had a lot of customer demand for actually also providing log management. So effectively what we're doing is we're integrating the log management of vRLIC with Wavefront. So if any of you have or are looking at Wavefront, this is something that's coming really, really soon, in a matter of a few weeks. And you'll see some announcements. There's a couple of presentations. If you're going to be at VMware Explore, sorry, about that. And again, this is really for your DevOps environments that are developing applications, but also if you have applications in production that you're monitoring, Wavefront is a great tool for that. And as I mentioned, we're also now going to be providing log management for that as well. Let me see what else. This is just another shot here at the that, and then the rest kind of talks about some of the specifics here, whether we're talking of hybrid log management that I talked about, but at least you'll have the slide here. That shows how we're quickly evolving those capabilities to be all controlled from the cloud, regardless of how many regions that you might have. Those regions could be in the cloud, those regions could be on-prem, those regions could be on VMC or on Azure, or whatever the case may be. So think of it of a much more centralized, almost like a manager in a way for logs. Actually, it would be. But this global view and ability to monitor the logs that you have, especially if you're large, corporations, multinational with data centers a little bit everywhere, and combination of prem as well as cloud. So I'm going to pause here, Andy, kind of run out through all the different scenarios, and if there's any specific ones anyone want me to drill in further, I'd be more than happy to do so.
Okay. So I know that once we reach an hour, some people have to drop off, things like that. So we're down a little bit. We still got a good 3/4 of our group here. So if anyone has questions, we've got another couple minutes here. Right now, there's nothing.
Yep.
While we're waiting for a minute, I will just remind the audience that this was recorded. Your TAM will make that available to you. And I will get this Q&A, the transcript from this rolled up and sent off to Serge for review. We do appreciate your feedback there. And Serge, you've given us lots of great content here to think about. Appreciate the acknowledgement where there are weaknesses, right? It's a reality that there's going to be weaknesses, but it's exciting to hear about what's coming to address those. And I appreciate the commitment to see the tight integration and the expansion of just getting beyond traditional log management, even where these things are going. So thank you much for your time. I don't see any other questions. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. All right. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time and great questions from everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Bye, folks, and hopefully we'll see you at VMware Explore in a few weeks.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.